All right. Well, back for another video about living in my car, that whole experience, and some other people that helped me along the way while I was living in my car in Alaska at the age of 16 in the mid 80s. Um, I was really on my own from about 1984 onward. I kind of bounced around. I lived with probably half the town there in Wasilla, Alaska, which is about an hour from Anchorage, small little town. And one of the guys I lived with was a football teammate, and his parents were awesome. This was probably 1984. This is before I actually ended up in the car, and they actually his name was Rob, and he had parents, younger sister, and all that stuff, and they were super nice. I couldn't believe they let me stay there. They found out I was basically on my own, and they took me in. And by this time, I had gotten a job in town. I was working at a grocery store, and so I was working there. And they had a truck, a Ford pickup, an old brown Ford pickup, like an F-150. And I had my license actually. It was, I was 16, and they let me use this truck. They didn't even know me, but they let me use the truck to go into town and go to my job at the grocery store. And so that's what I did. I'm gonna get my key here. So they would let me go into town and use this vehicle. People were so nice. I mean, I couldn't believe it. But this is the way it was in small town Alaska, And I know some of this stuff still goes on out there, but sure. But when I look back, I'm like, these people didn't even know me. I'm a 16-year-old kid. They don't know me. They don't know my parents. They don't know anything about my situation. All they knew was that I didn't have a place to stay. I had nowhere to go. And I'm so thankful to them. Now, I eventually ended up, I don't even remember what happened as how I ended up moving out of there. I think maybe something happened between myself and my friend Rob, and I ended up having to move out for some reason. I don't remember it because it was decades ago, This is over 40 years ago, It was getting windy out here. So it was getting, I was back on my own, and I ended up getting laid off, I think, at the grocery store, which landed me in the car. And, but I had bounced around. I was with a lot of different people during that time. One of the people I stayed with also was my wrestling coach, Mr. Foreman. He was a real good, godly man, and him and his wife, they had a couple of small children, and they knew that, I had no place to go. Neither did my older brother. I had an older brother who was a year ahead of me in high school, and so they let my brother and I live there in their home. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe the kindness and the love that they showed, not only Rob's family, because they were kind people, and to let me use their vehicle, and they let me do a lot of things there, that most people would probably never let you do, using their vehicles. And they had, and I had a lot of fun there. They had quads, like four-wheelers and stuff, things that I never, had a chance to get on. I think like those things had just come out then, or not soon, a few years before that maybe. That's early 80s, late 70s. And so, yeah, I lived with this family who let me borrow their vehicle to go to my job, and then I was with my coach, and him and his wife, again, were so nice. They stepped in, they fed me, they clothed me. I think they bought me some clothes, and the whole idea about this part of my life, and so much of it, is just people showing up when you need them the most, because I needed help. I needed a helping hand. And I think the biggest thing I got out of all that, at that part of my time there as a young man in Alaska, even before I ended up living in the car, is that people showed up. They really stepped up to the plate, big time. And I've mentioned, before that when I was in a pinch, during these years that, God came through. He really, really sent somebody into my life. He made sure that, I got my needs met. My needs were met. And Mr. Foreman, my coach, was one of those people who met my needs, as did Rob and so many other people. And let me tell you something. It doesn't take much. All it takes is one person. Let me put the finger one up here. I'm going to drink a tea. All it takes is one person to believe in you. That's all it takes. It doesn't take 1,000 people, 60,000 people in a stadium to believe in you, for you to believe in yourself. It takes one person to say one thing at one time. I'm proof of that. And I had a few people that believed in me, and that meant the world to me. Despite my situation, despite the situation I was in, the tough times I was going through, the belief that, I could pull through this, I could get through this, meant everything to me. That's all it takes. And I've had a few people in my life that have really impacted me. I have stuff that I remember that people told me from the 1970s that I still remember today. And I still carry that with me today inside as I do my faith, first and foremost. But I remember the things that they said to me 45 years ago, some of these people. And then during this time in high school when I was there, that time. But the power of one person, people like my coach, the friend Rob, other people that took me in, it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal. Big deal. Meant a lot to me. And I still remember their kindness and their love decades later, 40 years later. So, yeah. A coach, friends, they really saved me, really without even knowing it. They may not know that, that's the thing. If they watch this video, now they do, right? So, yeah, pretty special people that came along in my life. There were many, many others. I'll try to get to them, at least a few of them. Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen my other videos about living in a car in Alaska in the mid-'80s, you can check those out up here. I really appreciate you watching. I love you. God bless. We'll see you next time.